Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank our witnesses. Governor Walz, good to see you again. Governor Pritzker, Governor Hochul, good to see you again. Ms. Perryman, thank you for your willingness to come before this committee and help us with our work. At this very moment, as we sit in this hearing and at the order of President Trump, the National Guard are on the streets of Los Angeles and active duty Marines are on their way. At Trump's order, Californians are now forced to navigate an active military zone in their midst as they try to go to work or decide if it's safe to send their kids to school. And because of Trump, no American city or state is safe as he lays this groundwork to take his militarization playbook nationwide. 2 days ago, he confirmed that he is considering invoking the Insurrection Act to expand the deployment of active-duty military forces against civilians across this country, preparing for a future in which dissent is met with armed force and the machinery of war is turned inward on the American people. If unchecked, this marks not just a threat to our most sacred civil liberties, but a violent blow to American democracy itself. Last week in Los Angeles, peaceful Americans came out to protest the administration's cruel and illegal mass deportation operations in their neighborhoods. President Trump inflamed events on the grounds as an excuse to unleash the U.S. military on its own people, sending in 4,000 National Guard members without the approval of the governor of California, and deploying 700 active-duty Marines into an American city is meant to provoke, not pacify, and is an aggressive assertion of federal control where it is neither needed nor desired. Our Marines are often the first responders in a war zone, but American neighborhoods are not war zones. Protesters are not the enemy. They are Americans who have the constitutional right to peacefully assemble and speak up. The problem for President Trump and my colleagues across the aisle is that the American people hate what he is doing in Los Angeles to inflame tensions. Americans are deeply concerned that the president deployed federal troops to an American city over the objections of state and local leadership and knowing it would escalate the situation. He put members of the public, law enforcement officers, and troops in danger because he loves the images and theatrics of using force. Let's be clear. Democrats oppose violence and lawlessness in all its forms, as well as any threat to public safety. President Trump himself is the worst offender. The chaos he is fomenting in L.A. is just an extension of his flagrant disregard for the Constitution and our rule of law and democracy. It is clear that the Trump administration's mass deportation policy is not limited to those that have committed serious and violent crimes. It also includes children who are U.S. citizens, immigrants with legal status, and even international students. On February 4th, President Trump deported a 10-year-old girl, a U.S. citizen who was recovering from brain cancer while traveling to Houston for an emergency hospital visit. This 10-year-old girl was detained and deported with her undocumented parents and 4 siblings, 3 of whom were also born here in the United States. Her parents have no criminal history, and what's going to happen to her, an American child, now that she can't see her expert doctors, is unknown. Trump deported another U.S. citizen, a 2-year-old toddler from Fort Lauderdale on February 21st, deported to Brazil. But because she is not a citizen or resident of Brazil, she had to enter the country as a tourist, which leaves her unable to access key programs like pediatric care and daycare or school. Are our cities safer now that this 10-year-old girl and the 2-year-old toddler are gone? U.S. citizens, both of them? In Austin, Texas, a husband and wife were recently detained after a routine traffic stop. The husband was quickly deported, while the wife was released to pick up her 3 children from school, only to be deported with them several days later. 2 of those kids are U.S. citizens. Is the family the violent criminals that Trump is supposed to be saving us from? The Trump administration has tried to sweep aside the fact that this pattern of mass deportation operation is letting dangerous criminals roam free while it picks off peaceful, contributing members of our communities. Busboys at restaurants, day laborers at Home Depot, parents who are taking their kids to school. In late March, ICE agents wearing masks and hoodies detained Rumeysa Ozturk. And those of you who watched that abduction, when you compare the old films of the Gestapo grabbing people off the streets of Poland, and you compare them to those nondescript thugs who grabbed that student, that graduated student, it does look like a Gestapo operation. It does look like the Gestapo. She was snatched away and detained 1,700 miles away. Her congresswoman couldn't reach her. Her family couldn't reach her. She was held incommunicado, 1,700 miles away. Her attorney could not reach her. Yeah, that was Gestapo-like. That's an appropriate comparison. That's exactly what it was like. And when U.S. citizens, she was here legally studying at Tufts University. She had every right to be here. We gave her permission to come. Her family entrusted us. They chose Boston because it's a place of intellectual freedom and respect for cultural freedom. And that trust was apparently misplaced. Ms. Ozturk's a Turkish national on a student visa to attend Tufts University. A video of that incident shows Ozturk walking along a public street in Boston, Massachusetts, my home city, when several masked figures just snatched her phone and backpack, handcuffed her, and hustled her into an unmarked vehicle. What's that sound like? What does that sound like? The Trump administration is putting extremism, cruelty, and chaos over protecting kids and families. Trump isn't focused on getting violent criminals off our streets. He's terrorizing our communities to fulfill deportation quotas with fathers and mothers, grandparents, and kids. And he's trying to strong-arm our city and state leaders to divert their limited resources away from serious public safety threats to instead focus on peaceful, law-abiding families, just as he has diverted federal resources away from combating drug trafficking, violent crime, and terrorism to fuel his lawless mass deportation campaign. Trump isn't trying to protect us. He's trying to divide us. It's us and them. He's trying to divide us. And some people are helping him. He's pitting neighbor against neighbor. But it's not immigrant kids who are about to kick millions of Americans off their health care. It's not them. And he's doing that to pay for a tax break for billionaires. And it's not immigrants who are using the military to silence Americans exercising their right to speak truth to power. These are not the strong and measured actions of the leader of a free country. They are the ruthless maneuvers of an aspiring autocrat hell-bent on consolidating power by any means necessary. This is disgraceful. It should not happen in this country. This is wrong. Deploying the military against a civilian population is wrong. And if we don't step up, this will continue. If we don't step up and declare what is right under our Constitution, then other cities, other citizens will meet this same fate. I'm proud of my Democratic colleagues who are willing to stand up to this thuggery. Trump is a wannabe gangster, and he's showing the world what he's about. And I'm proud. You know, my dad served in the Second World War. He fought the Nazis in Northern Africa. He fought the Nazis on the Italian peninsula. And I think he's looking down right now and he's happy that I'm fighting today's Nazis. He's proud of that. We all should be. Mr. Chairman,